Okay. Right. Good evening. How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
I am well. It's nice that it's light out, but I don't like the time change, like the process of changing time, of losing an hour of sleep. I like sleep, and I have a hard enough time sleeping as it is. I don't like it when people take away my sleep. Let's see. Oh, window open. Nice. Warm weather makes me happy. Yes, the warm weather, the sun that we had today. Yeah, those are all good things. So I should not focus on the fact that I lost some sleep. I should be happy about the spring coming. Did anyone else have trouble getting signed in to Zoom tonight, or was it just me?
I got in
Yep.
okay, but it was really slow.
Okay. Yeah, at first it wasn't letting me log in, and then it was really slow to get going. So I was actually trying to log in for about 5 minutes. All right. It looks like we have a pretty good number of people here. Let's see. And it tried to download a file. Weird. Yeah. I wonder if there's something on Zoom's end, if they're doing some upgrading or something, updating or something. And then laptop has a problem. Oh, yeah. That's a bummer. Okay, well, if we lose you, Jackson, I'll understand why. I mean, it happens. You know, you guys know that I have a spotty connection a lot of times too. So, yeah, if you can come back, come back. And if you can't, that's why we record it so that you can go back later and check the recording for anything that you missed or need to see again. All right. It does look like we have most people that I think we'll probably have this evening. I mean, I do hope a few more come, but does anyone have any questions or concerns or anything? I did finally I was having trouble with Blackboard, which I do think was actually my internet connection and not Blackboard's problem, but it could have been, who knows? I just kept getting disconnected and error messages. But I noticed that my internet was not very strong. So it could have been one or the other, but I did finally get all of the grades and comments in for your pitch presentations. And overall, those looked really good. I would say that the most frequent area of improvement, opportunity for improvement, would be in the call to action. It seems like many of the teams kind of lost focus of who the intended audience was and what the purpose really was. And so instead of pitching to potential investors, those who would finance or fund your project so that you could create the product and produce that product, you kind of shifted toward the consumer of the product, and we're kind of trying to get people to buy it rather than people to invest in it, which, those are kind of two different audiences, two different purposes. So some of you had a call to action, it was just in the wrong direction to the wrong audience, and then others kind of missed the whole call to action, or it was so subtle it didn't really come across as a call to action. But I'm imagining for many of you, this was your first time doing that kind of a pitch. So it's, understandable, certainly forgivable, and we treat it as a learning opportunity. not as like some big horrible thing. So, but does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns that you want to raise now about anything regarding the class or life or anything at all? Or do you have any stories you want to tell before we get started and give the last couple of people who might be joining us a chance to log in? Let's see. Oh, unexpected company this week. I hope it was good company. Anyone else have anything going on? You don't have any questions or anything? Okay, then I will also talk about the memos, the proposal memos. Oh, head hurts. Like, yeah. I medicate my headaches with caffeine. So that's my suggestion to you is drink some caffeine. Let's see. My mom was watching my brother's friend's family because their parents were on a honeymoon, but the plumbing ended up, oh, yuck. I've had the plumbing back up before. That's no fun. So I'm glad that they had a good place to go. And I hope that was a good time for all of you to spend together. Yeah, so the other thing with the proposal memos, the research proposal memos, the majority of those were pretty good. I did notice that there seemed to be kind of two groups going on, and like if I could put the memos into two groups, and one group was, you know, getting all of the points, getting the like the requirements, and getting the statement of the problem, the research question, the interest in the whole situation, sharing the sources and the research plan. You kind of had all of that. Most of you had that in a good standard memo format, so that was good. I had some who had all the formatting correct, but it seemed you again kind of lost your way on what exactly the purpose of the memo was, which was to propose the research you want to conduct. And some of you were proposing solutions already. And so if you did a whole bunch of extra work to try to get to the solution part, well, I guess this week's work might be a little easier for you. But you really wanted to just talk about the research. What were your plans for finding out more about this problem and solution? It's like trying to find solutions. So we kind of had that. And then there were a few that were kind of struggling with memo format altogether. And my suggestion there, if you didn't look at or don't have access to the example memo that's in the handbook, which is on page, I think, let me look at it because I keep saying the wrong page. It's 332 in the page or in the book. It's this page here. If you don't have that, you can't access it. You can always ask me to scan in some of this stuff. You know, obviously I can't scan the whole handbook for you, but for things like this, I can do that. And then the other thing is that Googling memo templates, memo examples can give you a good representation of what the standard memo format is. It is a pretty standardized format, so you won't see too many variations on what a memo would look like. And so you want to kind of stick to what you find as closely as possible. Does anyone, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the comments on yours or just in general, does anyone have any questions about the research proposal memo? Let's see. The flight of the dog. But at least he kind of calmed down and laid down next to you when you went to sleep. So that's good. All right, I'm not seeing any new additions in the chat and nobody is jumping to ask questions or anything. So I'm going to assume that you all are okay with what's been there, or you haven't had a chance to look yet. And when you do, you will let me know if you have questions. So I'm always available to, well, not like available 24/7, but I'm always willing to answer questions that you have. So please do hit me up if you have any questions or concerns. So it looks like everyone who is going to be here is here. We may have a couple more. I think we only have maybe 3 more who are not here right now, and they may or may not join us. So what we'll do is I'm going to turn off my camera and share my screen, and we'll get started with tonight's stuff. I did get the link posted on Blackboard, but I did not get that done until right before class. I mean, I've had the thing done. I just didn't manage to get it posted earlier before I got too frustrated with Blackboard and quit. So it is there on Blackboard for anyone who wants it on your own computer. But tonight, we're going to be talking about research and the APA annotated bibliography. Has anyone in the class done an APA annotated bibliography before, or any annotated bibliography, APA style or otherwise? Okay. Okay. So we have a few of you who have done one. Mostly, it looks like many of you have done them as MLA, which is probably more common for the work that you've done up to this point. Yeah, because any others? Okay. All right, and we have one who hasn't done the bibliography, but has done the argumentative essay in APA format. So we're not going to be doing the full APA research formatted essay, because we're doing a report, a technical report instead, a formal report instead. But we are going to be using APA citation style because I think you'll find that more common in the professional world than you will find MLA, which again is pretty limited to languages and literature fields. So APA is a good one to practice at this point, because it's more likely that that's what you will encounter in the professional world. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk first about research, and then we will talk about the APA annotated bibliography. Okay. So we have research. We will talk a little bit about reading like a researcher. I don't want to make too many assumptions about your familiarity with this level of research. I know that English 101 or the equivalent is a prereq for this course. I also know that for the past, I want to say 5 years, the GRCC curriculum has placed the heavier research emphasis in English 102, which many of you may not have taken or may not have to take because of the nature of the program that you're in. So if this is all review for you, great, you have an easy class tonight. If this is new for you, please be sure you're asking your questions or making note of questions that you want to ask at some point in class or after class, so that we can make sure that we're kind of all on the same page with this. So we will be talking a little bit about reading like a researcher, and we're going to be looking specifically at reading scholarly articles in particular. And then we will talk about that annotated bibliography and finally look at the assignments that are due in the next week. So we're going to begin with research, finding quality sources, because it's not enough just to find sources. We have to find quality sources. And the question here is, what makes a source a quality source? Anyone know? Peer-reviewed, okay. Peer-reviewed is one aspect of making sure that the source is quality. It can be quality without being peer-reviewed, but peer review is definitely, if an article has been peer-reviewed, it is generally a high-quality article. It's one that passes the tests of its own field of study and research and scholarship. Any other things you know of that make a source a quality source? Author has credentials, yes. So checking out the credentials of the author. I mean, you guys, I could sit down and write an article on astrophysics or neuroscience or something like that, but am I qualified for that? Nope. I could make it sound good though, but I wouldn't have the right credentials, the right qualifications for that field of study. So you wouldn't want to trust what I have to say. Even if my sources are high quality sources, what's to say that I actually understand those sources when it's not my field of study? Primary source, interviews from individuals, for example. Often primary sources are high quality sources, because usually when you're working with primary sources such as an interview, you're working with someone who is intimately involved in whatever it is you're trying to research. Someone who's, say, a firsthand witness or experiences a situation of some sort firsthand. So that the eyewitness kind of thing can be, as long as you have a reliable person that's being interviewed, then yeah, that would help with the high quality aspect of it. All right, I don't see anything new popping up in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and take us to the CRAP test. How many of you are familiar with the CRAP test? Any of you heard of this, used it in any of your previous courses, or heard other people talk about it? English 102, all right, good. Same, yes. Okay. All right, so the CRAP test, for those who are not familiar, is a way of kind of vetting your sources. It's an easy way to ask the right questions to find out if your source is really a high quality source. So you want to start off with the currency. Is it a timely source? Has it been published? Was it written or produced in a time period that makes it still usable for you? Or is it super old? And what is current for any given situation just really depends on that field of study and how fast things move in that field of study. When you're talking about things like literature and history and that kind of stuff, old sources are just as good as new sources usually. But when you're talking about, some of the cutting edge science and technology, medicine, that kind of stuff, you want things that are very current, often within the last few months. You aren't really going to be interested in or find useful the things that were produced several decades ago, unless you're trying to trace how knowledge has formed over time or something along those lines. Relevance is the content of your source suitable for your research? Does it offer the right kinds of information for your research? And that doesn't mean is it exactly about your topic, but does it offer you information that supports you learning about your topic? Does it offer context? Does it offer background information? Does it help you understand the topic better? Does it offer an opposing viewpoint? How, is it suitable for you? Or is it on some related topic, but it really doesn't offer anything for the research you're doing, in which case it wouldn't be suitable. And then the authority, as we had in the chat, are the authors qualified? So it is on you as a researcher to make sure that the authors of any material you are using are qualified to be writing on those topics. That's why a lot of times when we go into popular media, especially, we see some articles that might be really good articles in themselves. They might draw upon some good sources, but we might want to be a little skeptical about them if the writer is someone with a degree in a different field and who just happens to be kind of a generalist writer, someone who pulls together different sources and writes about them. That can be useful. It can be helpful in understanding a topic, but it's something we want to maybe say this might not want to be one of our top sources. We might not want to quote directly from this source unless we're quoting something that author is quoting. But maybe it can help us understand the topic, the scope of the topic, or the history or the context. Accuracy. Is it reliable and correct? Now, this is kind of tricky sometimes when you are researching a topic that you're not an expert in. How do you know if it's reliable, if it's correct, if it's accurate? Well, the way you would know is, do your other sources provide the same information? Do your other sources corroborate the claims that are made in this source? Or is this source the only one making these other claims and you can't find support for it anywhere else? In that case, it might not be accurate and it might not be a source you want to use or rely on very much. And then purpose. Does the purpose support your needs as a researcher? So I know that you've learned in your past writing classes about purpose. So like, is the source trying to teach you something? Is the source trying to persuade you of something? Is the source trying to sell you something? What's the purpose of that source? And then along with the purpose, you're also looking at the biases that are inherent in that source. So you want to look at that. Now, there is a full list of questions that breaks down each one of these more for those who are maybe not certain about one of your sources and you want to get like a little bit of extra verification of whether you think it's a quality source or not. I would say go through these questions at the research guides in Benedictine University. So if you click on this, it'll open that up. We're actually going to watch the video that comes up in just a minute, but it gives you some more questions to ask for each category here. It gives you a presentation you can refer to if you want to. There's an evaluating sheet and an evaluating sources checklist that you might find handy to refer to. So this is a good source. And in my own English 101 classes in particular, I use these questions to help my students. Like, they have to do this with all of their sources. They have to go through I created my own worksheet, but it's based very much on this. And so I give full credit to whoever created this on my actual worksheet. It does refer back to this Benedictine University page. But I have my 101 students and they hate me for this, but then they like me later. But I make them go through all of the questions for all of their sources to help them learn that process of vetting sources to see if they're really good or not, whether they're, quality or not. So I do recommend this particular site. Here, okay. Right. Any questions about the CRAP test or any comments about it? Anyone have a bad experience with it? Did it lead you in the wrong direction, or you find it helpful or just tedious?
I am totally struggling on the keyboard, so I'm just gonna say I've found it helpful. I've used it since high school. I don't use it all the time, but I do find it helpful. I don't know why. I was working with my hands on my car earlier, so maybe my hands are just shaky. I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, we all struggle sometimes with the keyboard, so it's fine. You can always jump in on the microphone if that's easier than typing things in. But yeah, it is. I mean, it is tedious. It can be tedious, but it is a good tool. And so, Nelson, I'm glad to hear that you've been one who's been using it. I hope that more of you, when you have to do research, will refer to it, at least have it in mind so that you're checking these things before you decide on using a source. Because remember, that is one of your responsibilities as a researcher, to make sure that you're using the highest quality sources that you can access. Right. And I did say that we are going to watch that video. It's really short, so.
If you want to succeed at your assignments or research, you should only use quality information, whether it's found in books, journal articles, or websites. Use the following criteria, also known as the CRAP test, to critically evaluate any source of information. Currency. When was the information published, updated, and/or revised? Is the information out of date for the topic? Relevance or intended audience. How much information is presented? Does it provide a superficial treatment or a detailed analysis? Is the information related and relevant to your topic? Is the readership level appropriate, neither too simple nor too sophisticated? Authority. Not all books or journal articles in an academic library are scholarly. Who are the authors and/or editors, and what are their credentials? For journals, are articles peer-reviewed? That is, do they have the approval of other experts in the field? For books, are they published by scholarly presses, popular presses, or self-published? Accuracy and verifiability. Does the source match your understanding of the topic? Can you verify the claims in other sources? Never rely on just one source. Is there a bibliography or list of works cited? What types of sources and how many relevant sources are cited? This is an indication of the depth of the author's knowledge. Purpose and objectivity. Is the purpose stated? Is the subject approached from an objective standpoint? If not, what is the author's bias and how might it influence the information presented? Be wary, there may be more than one perspective on any given issue. Using these criteria, currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose, to critically evaluate sources of information will help ensure that you're only using quality sources of information. If you need more help with evaluating sources.
Okay, they want you to go to their library, but you should go to our library for help. Any questions, comments before we go on to actually finding the sources? Okay. Okay, so then how do we find quality sources? What do you do? What do you guys do to find your quality sources? Databases? One search tool at GRCC library. Okay, you guys know the answer is there. Google Scholar, good. YouTube, yes. Yep. Credible sites like .edu and .gov.org, those ones, yes. Those are all good answers to that question. So basically you can kind of group these into two categories. I called them Google and databases, but databases, we're gonna kind of expand upon that a little bit. But Google, like a general Google search can help you to see the diversity of sources available. And Google Scholar can help narrow those down and kind of get you the higher quality results. What's the big problem with Google Scholar though?
You don't have access to everything on there.
Exactly. So Google Scholar can lead you to some really good sources, but if you try to access them through Google, like the links on Google Scholar, most of the really good ones you won't be able to access because they require subscriptions to academic or professional journals or other publications like that. Excuse me. So what you want to do with results like that is copy down the relevant information and then go over to your academic library and jump into either the one search through GRCC. I know we have Ferris students and Davenport students in this class, and I don't remember where else. I know there's at least one other institution represented here besides GRCC. So if you're more comfortable with your main school's library resources, feel free to use those. But obviously I only have access to GRCCs, so that's what I'm going to show you. So you can take that information from the Google Scholar search and try to find it through your academic library. And sometimes even the public library will have access to some things, but they won't have access to everything. So the databases through the college library offer more targeted options. And even though not everything is of highest quality, generally you are going to get a higher degree of quality in your results than just the general Google search. But don't discount the Google search. It can be useful, especially if you are looking for YouTube videos, for example. There are some really good high quality things published on YouTube or available on YouTube that would count as quality sources. So, use Google, but use it smartly. Also, we want to briefly discuss the difference between primary and secondary sources. So I'm going to have us watch this video. It's a short video. This is the Grand Valley one. And so I'll have you watch that. And the person does I think, a pretty good job of explaining the difference between primary and secondary sources. For our purposes, it's not super important that you can pinpoint whether a source is definitely primary or definitely secondary, but knowing the difference and having an idea when you're looking for your sources is really pretty important as a researcher. So we will watch this video. maybe. We might just stare at a spinning circle for a few minutes. If it doesn't load soon, you guys can watch it on your own. I'll try one other thing. Okay, that's just not going to work either. Where did the YouTube go? Okay, sorry about that, guys, but I apparently still am not having good internet, even though my connection is showing as stronger. My internet is obviously not what it should be. So we will skip that video and come back to it, or you can watch that on your own. Again, like I said, it's not super duper important that you right at this point can identify the difference between them, but it is important for you to know what is primary and what is secondary. So basically, primary sources are those sources that involve firsthand research, firsthand experience of a situation. So if you're talking about say what's going on in Ukraine right now, your primary sources are the people on the ground. They are the people on the ground in Ukraine. So those would be the Ukrainian people. Those would be the reporters who are on site in Ukraine. The secondary sources would be the people who are here, who are giving commentary about what they're seeing and what they're hearing out of Ukraine. Does that make sense? Yes, okay. Thank you, because I was wondering if you guys were still with me, if I completely lost everything at this point. Okay, so primary sources, they're the people who are right there involved. Secondary sources are the observers and the commentators, those offering analysis. That would be more of your secondary sources. And the exact nature of these sources really depends on the field. When you're talking about, say, like history and literature, you're looking at like manuscripts, letters, those kinds of things. When you're talking about science, you're talking about the research, the original research that's being done. Thanks, Maddie. But you can interrupt over mic. I don't mind. It makes me feel less alone, but yeah, I know everything is really slow. So if I go too fast or if I don't give you time to jump in on the chat, I will try to come back to you, or you can always just, there are little icons and things that you can use to get me to slow down or stop or something. All right. For those of you who want to use, whoops, sorry about that. Those of you who want to use the GRCC library, many of you are probably familiar with it already, but this link, I just took you directly to the databases. You can see that there are 196 databases that are available through GRCC. You obviously are not going to find all of them useful, because if you are doing something in the tech field, an accounting, tax, and banking collection is not going to be helpful to you. However, if you are in accounting, you're probably not going to come down here to Agricola and learn about agriculture. So, you know, you can choose the databases that work for you. So this first one has to do with business. Academic OneFile is really good for general academic research. I guess Academic Search Complete I've never used before, but they say it's popular. So it seems like that one also has many academic fields. a lot of them listed here: archaeology, astronomy, biology, engineering, and so forth. So you would just want to go down and click on one of them. So let's go ahead to this. We have a few people studying accounting here. So let's just go to the accounting site, maybe. Okay. So this is one thing to know if you're not familiar with using the GRCC system. When you're off campus, you have to put in your last name and your number, your rater card number, in order to access the databases. Again, because it is subscription material. So they want to make sure that it's the people paying tuition and working for the institution that have access to that. And we'll see if it loads, because my internet connection is unstable. Okay. So this is the accounting, tax, and banking collection. And so if you were to be doing some research on something related to this, you would just put your search terms in here, and then you could click boxes for something that you want. If you want full text, if you want to make sure it's peer reviewed, which it doesn't have to be, but that is another way of making sure it's higher quality and that the writers have the qualifications to write about that topic. And then if you don't want the wire feeds, you can exclude those as well. If you're trying to stick mostly to like journals and books, you would exclude wire feeds. And then once you're done, you just click the search thing or hit enter, and your sources will pop up. You can narrow them down. Each of the databases is a little different in the way it works, but they're all fairly similar. That's the basic search. You could go to advanced search if you wanted to, and I think you can see what publications are a part of this database. And since this is a particular topic that I will never voluntarily do any research and study in, I don't have any good search terms to be thinking of right now. So does anyone have any that you want to use? Okay. Okay. So you can use the GRCC. You can go through OneSearch, or you can go directly to the databases. OneSearch, if you're not familiar with that, if you go to the main page of the library, you have the GRCC OneSearch, and there should be a search box. Yeah, it just took a minute, but you can just put your search term in here, and instead of just going through like journal articles and things, it will go through everything in the library catalog. So you would get articles, books, videos, audio recordings, magazines, like everything that they have access to would show up through this one search. Any questions about using that? Okay, similar to Ferris, good. So I'm imagining it's also similar to Davenport and everywhere else. They all seem to be, pretty similar in how they approach things these days. Okay, we'll move on then to reading like a researcher. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time going into detail on this, but I do have an activity that I want you to do. So we'll just kind of go through these things until we get up to that activity. So the first thing that I have here is just a general method for reading. This is especially important when you're looking at longer pieces, but short pieces, this is a good method to follow too. So the first thing is to skim. A lot of times in school, we're told you can't just skim it, you have to read it. But no, when you are doing research and you are trying to get through a lot of information, the first thing you want to do is skim. You need to get a feel for the whole source, and you need to figure out, is this source going to be worth my time to read or not? If you skim it and it doesn't have anything to offer you, you don't want to go to the next part and read things closely and make annotations and then realize afterwards that you just wasted an hour of your time on something that's not helpful to you at all. So if you do get to the close read, you'll want to do more than just reading. At that point, you're reading with, I always say it, reading with a pencil in hand. But obviously a lot of times we're reading our research on the computer these days, so there are other tools you can use for that, but we'll look at some ways to annotate in a moment. And then after you're done, or really while you're reading, but not just after you finish, but while you read, you should be reflecting on what this source contributes to your project and how. And there are different ways that it can contribute for you. So when you're skimming, you want to kind of look at the structure first. And the first thing you want to do is read the title and read the abstract. The title is obviously going to be what would capture your attention about the article in the first place. And does the title have something, does it indicate that it's going to be a serious piece of writing, that it's related to your topic, that it's going to give you some good information about your topic? The abstract is the paper, it's like the nutshell version of the paper. Most abstracts are around 200 to 250 words. Generally, you won't go over 250 words in an abstract. The abstract gives you the nutshell of the paper. It tells you what the research question is, what the research process was, and what the conclusions were. And so it's your snapshot overview. And if you read that abstract and it does not seem to offer anything for you, for your topic, you don't even have to go any further. You can stop right there. But if you read the abstract and you think that it might be helpful to you, then skip the rest of the paper and go to the conclusion. Read the conclusion. Does the conclusion still indicate that the paper is going to have something for you? If it does, then go back and look at the introduction, because again, the introduction is going to give you a bit of an overview. And if the introduction, you're still feeling good, and this is not close reading, this is more of like scanning it, skimming through it, surface level reading, then you can continue on to the discussion section, the methods and results, and looking at the references. If you get through the structure and you realize, okay, this is going to be a source that I want, then you want to analyze a little bit of what the author is trying to say, their motivation, what the research contributes to the field overall, what conversation is this author trying to participate in, what are the main arguments, and how does it relate to your other sources. And this still is part of your skimming, part of your really thinking about, like, how much can you of those things can you answer at this point? Does it seem like you're going to be able to fill in the blanks of what you can't answer yet if you go back and read it? And is that going to be helpful? Is that going to support your project? If so, then you go on to close reading, where you will do some more annotation. Annotation just means making notes. So here are some ideas for those of you who are like, oh, I know I should be doing something with this, but I tend to just highlight everything because I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. Many of us struggle with that. I've struggled with that for a long time. And I've, gotten to a point where I can pretty much figure out what it is I need to pay attention to. But even I find myself sometimes highlighting or underlining, marking more than I actually need to. So one of the things you can do is, especially helpful with a larger article, number the paragraphs. That's going to give it kind of a shorthand for you, especially if you take notes in a separate document. Then you can have them labeled by paragraph and it'll be easy to match up with the source. You can group the paragraphs. So if there's a group of 2 or 3 paragraphs together that sort of expand on the same idea, then you can, say paragraphs 4 through 6 and treat those together as like one unit. And then you want to summarize each group that you have. 10 words or less. This is a way for you to keep track of the main ideas that are being presented, as well as give you a quick way to scan the article and find the parts that you want. And so that's kind of what you would do in the left-hand margin, or maybe if you want to flip these around and do it in the right-hand margin, that's fine too. The right margin, or the opposite one, is where you can do some more kind of analytical type of annotations. So for each section, use a power verb to tell what the author is doing in that section, describing the problem, arguing for a particular solution or against a point made by someone else, analyzing results of a study, comparing 2 experiments or 2 solutions or whatever. And be specific about it. Don't just say describing, but say what's being described. Describing the problem, describing the context, describing the way a solution would be implemented in a particular situation. You don't have to go into detail, but you do want to be specific there. Ask questions. If you have a question, even like, well, what does this mean? Or how does this compare to something else? And I would say, I forgot to put it on here, but I would also say make connections in this part. So connecting one part of the article to another, or making connections saying like this section here supports a section whatever in another source. So making sure that you can connect your sources together. And then, drawing, some of you drawing pictures or diagrams, charts is really helpful for keeping track of ideas, for understanding what someone is presenting. So, jump in with any drawing or diagrams that work for you. Whatever you do, whatever method you use should be useful for you. You're not doing it for anyone else, even though you've had classes where you've had to turn in annotated readings before. It's not for your professor. I personally don't care what kinds of markings you use, what kind of system you use. I care that it is useful for you and that you can understand, track your understanding, that you can make comparisons, that you can make connections and ask questions through whatever system you use. And then when you are marking, because like I said, I find myself even sometimes getting so involved in something that I'm highlighting everything. And that is why I have the last several years only used erasable highlighters. Because when I find I'm over highlighting, I can say, oh, wait, I don't think I need all of this highlighted. So let me just go erase some of that. But whenever you do highlight, underline, or circle, make it purposeful. So mark the claims that the author is making. What are the key words? Many abstracts will tell you a list of keywords. Those are the words that are defined in the article and that are used over and over again to present ideas that are part of the thesis or whatever. But they're the ones that keep coming up, and there shouldn't be too many of those. Otherwise, then you'd have to wonder, well, what makes it actually a keyword if there are 15, 20 keywords? You want a manageable list. For most cases for the research you would do, maybe 5 keywords is good. Mark the sources that the author refers to, especially if there's a source that the author keeps coming back to and relying on over and over again. Mark that source. If the author is using power verbs throughout, some of those really strong verbs that make the paper, like that's where they're making their claims, they're authoritative, mark those, because that will bring you back to where the main points are. And then anytime an author of a serious scholarly work starts using figurative language, it's there for a reason. Often it's to make some sort of analogy that makes something more understandable. I would mark that so that you can make sure you pay attention to why that's there. Right. Any questions about the annotation aspect, or any comments or suggestions, tips you want to share? I'm not seeing anything coming up in the chat yet, but if it does, I'll come back to it. Okay, so then after you do your reading, and really, like I said earlier, as you're doing your reading, but definitely after, you want to reflect on the source. You want to make sure that you understand it, and you want to ask yourself, how does this source help me understand the problem or potential solutions? Does it offer context, background information? Does it explain the problem in a way that really resonates with you? Does it offer solutions that maybe you hadn't thought of, or that seem particularly plausible or implausible? How does it really affect your understanding? What new ideas does the source raise for you about the problem or the potential solutions? So what's the new information from this article? There should be something new in the different sources to, kind of differentiate them from each other. So what's the new thing? What's the different thing, the unique thing that this article brings? And then what is its usefulness? Can you use it to understand your problem? Can you use it to argue for a solution or against a different solution? Does it provide evidence that you can use, quotes that you can use to support a claim that you want to make? What is its particular usefulness? And so you just want to jot down, I like to do that kind of at the top of the page. If I can print my sources, it's especially helpful to me. If not, then I can kind of do a comment. If I'm using like something where I can use a commenting feature, like a PDF reader or something, then I can put a comment at the top with that information, or a sticky note of some sort. So we do have a reading activity that I would like you to do, which does involve going into some small groups. I'm going to put you, let's see, there are 18 of you. I'll put you in groups of 3. Okay. I'll put you in groups of 3. And then you can read together the serious article, Your Cheating Brain, and you'll read the scholarly article, The Invisible Gorilla Strikes Again, and the title just goes on and on. And then you will use the guide that's here to discuss the experience of reading both of these articles. And after, I think it'll probably take 15 to 20 minutes. It may take less, and if so, please come back to the main room when you're done. And if it does take, if I see that very few people are back, or there are still a few groups that are out after 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how many people are in the main room at that point, I'll send out a broadcast message letting you know that I'll be closing down the groups in a few minutes. That way you can kind of wrap up your discussion wherever you are. But I would like I would like you to try and follow that sort of process of skimming first, then reading more closely, kind of making, you probably aren't going to do a lot of annotations, but maybe just making some notes of things to remember, things you understand or questions you have. We're not obviously going to be using this research, so you don't want to invest too much into the articles themselves. It's more the process and what you're taking away from that, what we get from the discussion. And we have just lost a couple of people. I don't know if I scared them away by group work again or what, but yeah. So go ahead and make sure that you can open up these documents. If somebody does want to toss links into the chat, that would be great. I'm going to go ahead and set up some breakout rooms for you. Let's see. Let's see. We've got 16. Oh, I don't want to recreate. Oops. Let's go here. Okay, everyone who is here now is assigned to a room, so I'm going to open up all the rooms. Let's see. It won't allow me to look at the first one due to connectivity. The second one is fine. Okay. All right, I'll tell you what, why don't you guys go ahead and look at the second one, because that's actually the more important one right now anyway. I will see if I can figure out what's going on with the first one. If we can't look at the first one tonight, yeah, we'll just have to wing it, guys. We will have to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and that's what we'll do. So go ahead. I'm going to open the rooms. Go ahead and look at the second one if you guys can all access that. If you run into too many problems, let me know, and I will figure out a plan B. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. All right, the rooms are open, so I'll see you back here sometime. Let me see here. Hmm. All right, so it looks like we're all back in the main room. Were you all able to access the first document with the new link?
Group one didn't.
Yeah, we were able to.
You were able to, group one was not able to. Some of you were, okay. Took a minute, yeah. It kept telling me that sharing wasn't available. And then finally it let me share the link with you. So if you didn't get a chance to read it, that's okay. Those of you who did can kind of fill in for those who were not able to. All right, so let's talk about your experience with these two articles. What was your comfort level with each one? Those who could read it, and if you could only read the second article, what was your comfort level with that article? Like with the reading experience of it, how comfortable were you?
I was comfortable with the first one because it was kind of a summary of the second one itself, and it used language that's easier to read. But the second one was more scientific, and if you didn't really have a background in science, it was pretty difficult to read.
Okay, good. Did anyone find this the same experience, or did anyone have a different experience? Was it just as easy to read one as the other?
I think the second one was probably it was more difficult, but I don't think it was too bad.
Mhm.
More of the problem at least would be trying to stay focused because you're filtering through a lot of like detail that you don't necessarily need for what you're trying to research necessarily. So like when it's talking about each experiment, it goes into detail with some of the equations they used, and it talks about like a p-score, I think, or a p-test actually, and some of the other information and stuff that you don't really need to know, but it's the thorough like this is how it happened. And so it made it harder to stay focused for sure. But I don't think the language was particularly, it was definitely more, difficult or more complex, but I don't think it was like particularly hard. Maybe that was just because I've had experience with
Okay.
scientific articles before, but I don't know.
No, that is a good point. Like, if you have, the more experience you have with reading those kinds of scholarly scientific articles, even if you're not familiar with that topic itself, the article reading experience is easier than when you don't have a lot of experience with it, because then you are working in a genre that you're not well versed in, as well as a subject area that you're not as well versed in, and you put both of those together and it can make it a little difficult to get through. So some of your comfort level has to do with the amount of experience you've had with that particular kind of article. I have a comment in the chat, so I'm going to read that real quick. Let's see. This person experienced a little discomfort with each. The first one, there were no breaks in it, so I kept getting a bit distracted because it just flowed together. The second one was more uncomfortable because it was very professional and directed toward those more familiar with the experiment or study. But I did appreciate the photo so you could see what they were talking about. Yes, so visuals are really important. Yeah, I think those are some good points there. As far as design, layout, page layout and design are really important, even in the first article where there's not a lot of white space to break it up. And so for some people that can feel overwhelming. It can be hard to stay focused, even if the reading itself is a bit easier or more comfortable. And then the second one, when you add in the fact that it's written for a specific audience that you as a reader are not part of, that makes it a little harder as well. Any other people want to share your experience, your comfort level with these articles and what made one what it was for you, more or less comfortable? I think you've also addressed some of the intimidating or readable aspects and similarities and differences, but what else can we say about those two things? What makes them intimidating or readable? What are some of the similarities and differences that you noticed?
Well, I kind of had a question. Was that second article considered a primary source? Because there was a summary of some prior experiments in there as well.
Okay, so any original research is going to be considered a primary source. Most original research will refer to, build off of research that's already been done, in which case those those parts of it would be secondary. But overall, if the paper is if the purpose of the paper is to present original research, original experimentation, that kind of stuff, then it would be considered a primary resource in that field.
Okay, that's what I was aiming for.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone want to say anything more about the intimidating factor, readable factors, similarities and differences? Or do you have any other questions, like Ethan jumping in with questions? That's good. I like that.
I would say something similar, of course, is the content. They're both talking about, basically similar thing about inattentive blindness.
Mm-hmm.
But the first one kind of just kept flowing all together. There was really no abstract, really no breaks. So it may have been a little bit harder to keep track, but the second one was broken up into sections and had an abstract. So that was a little bit easier to follow where they were going with it.
Good.
So I feel like the first one would be a lot harder to take notes on because you don't really know in the very beginning if it's actually what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So you get like through the whole thing.
So yeah, that would definitely be one of the advantages of the scholarly sources that have the abstract, because you get a feel for the whole source from the beginning and don't have to read the whole thing first and then decide, oh, wait, this really didn't help me, which is really frustrating when you're trying to do some research and, fit it in with everything else in your life and meet deadlines and all of that. Good. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Emily?
I even think too that they even cited in the first one part of the scholarly journal.
Mm-hmm.
I think in one of the sections I caught that as well. So that would make that a secondary
Yes.
source. Okay.
Yes, that one would be a secondary source. That the serious but not scholarly one, the one that everyone had trouble opening, that would be a secondary source. Yeah. Right. So if we're looking just at the scholarly article now, did anyone follow that kind of process of skimming first, reading the title, the abstract, the conclusion, and then going back and looking at the rest of the article?
Yeah, in group one, we attempted to, but it is, considering how much data was in it, it was very hard to kind of skim through and, get all the knowledge from it, because they're kind of, they're breaking down all kinds of statistics in there and facts. So you kind of had no choice but to actually go in depth and read it and jot notes. So I think the scholarly one was very difficult to skim.
Okay. Interesting. Did anyone else find that the scholarly one was difficult to skim?
Yeah, I would say so. There was quite a bit of information to retain.
With the amount of detail they were going over, like at times I found myself having to stop and read a little longer than I wanted to,
Okay.
which might sound stupid, but
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound stupid. It sounds like many experiences that I've had. Yeah. So I mean, the skimming idea is a good one, but it can only take you so far, as you've seen. If you were really trying to figure out if you could use this article or not, you do have to stop and read some of it, and maybe more than you really hoped to have to stop and read, right? Before you could figure out for sure if you can use it. Do you even, know what they're talking about? Does it make sense to you? Are you finding the information that you need? It is still a good idea to start by reading the abstract. I mean, that's why it comes at the beginning of the paper, before the body of the paper, before anything in the paper, you get the abstract. So reading the abstract is always a good idea, because it does, if nothing else, it gives you the structure of the paper. It gives you an insight into what the paper is going to cover. Now, finding that information isn't always as straightforward as we'd like it to be, but you can go through that process of, reading the abstract, then skipping to the conclusion, really reading the conclusion, deciding from there, do I want to keep reading or not? Do I need to keep reading or not? And sometimes when you're doing larger research projects, whether it's for school or for your professional life, you might have to make some brutal decisions about whether you want to keep going or not with something. And at some point, you may end up cutting an article that really could be useful, or keeping one that ultimately doesn't add as much as you had hoped, just because of the density of the material and trying to get through it. But that's okay. It's not gonna make or break the entire world to do that, or your entire project, most likely. But really kind of getting an understanding of how scholarly articles are put together, where to find the information is important, especially when you're not as familiar with them, but you have to use them for whatever purpose. Does anyone have any other comments about the process of reading them, or questions, or anything you want to share, anything that came up in your group discussions that you want to share, rather than just going through the rest of these bullet pointed questions? All right. I will keep an eye on the chat in case anything comes up, but in the meantime, we can return to our presentation and talk specifically about the bibliography. All right. So it seems like many of you have had experience with bibliographies, whether APA or MLA or some other format. Some of you may have done just a straightforward bibliography, which isn't all that much different from a works cited or a reference page. Just the main difference is that the bibliography is a record of all of the research you've done, whereas a reference page in APA or a works cited page in MLA is what you've actually used in your paper, whether you've quoted, paraphrased, or summarized it, or in some other way referred to it. You only include what you've actually used in the works cited or reference page. Whereas the bibliography is like everything you've consulted, whether you actually use it or not. let's see here. There is supposed to be a video here. Clearly, it was not going to show up for us because of the connection. So I am going to skip that for now. It is a really good video on APA stuff and annotated bibliographies. So I do encourage you to watch that video on your own. And I am sorry that we can't watch it together tonight so that we can discuss it. But we can only do what we can do with the internet we're given. And I just now am seeing, since this is big, a typo on the citation section. So I will fix that after we're done. Okay, so with the annotated bibliography, you are going to be giving some, you're going to set up your paper in a way that the first thing you do is give us some context, which is where you're going to state the problem and state your research question. That way, when I'm looking at your annotated bibliography, I can know exactly what you're trying to do with your research. What were you looking for when you chose these sources? That is something that I am adding to a typical bibliography. Normally you wouldn't have those things, but I always ask writers to put them at the top to give context to me as the reader. Then you will create a complete APA citation for each source. You'll arrange the citations in alphabetical order. And then you will have an annotation for each of the source in which you state the authority. So making sure that the source you're using is written by someone with the authority to write it. And then summarizing the author's main argument or main point. And you don't have to summarize the entire source. You only have to give a summary of the part that's relevant for your project. So if you're looking at a 25-page research paper or journal article, you don't need the entire thing, most likely. Maybe all you need is found in the conclusion or the introduction or the methodology somewhere in there. Or it might just be a chart or diagram that you use from it. You only have to summarize the part that's relevant to you and your project, and then briefly explain its relevance to your project. Does it provide an understanding of the problem? Does it provide a suggestion for the solution? Does it provide evidence for some claim that's being made? So you want to have those things in your annotated bibliography. Those are the annotations. So you'll have your problem and research question at the top of the page. Then you will have all the citations and the annotations for each citation. And this annotated bibliography with the underline here does link back to our project document. And if you scroll down to part 2, research, you will see that the bibliography is due Monday. Its purpose is to present a record of the research you have conducted. The audience, which primarily for this is me, is academic professional audience. And then your genre is a bibliography with APA citation styles. So you'll be doing your research. You should already have a few sources. This is where you'll be looking for some more sources. You want to understand the scope of the problem and search for a plausible solution to the problem. That's your goal for the research. So you're going to create this bibliography as a record of the research that you do. You want to have approximately 5 to 7 quality sources at minimum. And remember, those sources don't have to be journal articles, all of them. You can have high quality videos. You can have some secondary sources. You can have interviews. You can have a survey that you create and share, whether it's a formal one or an informal one that you do view through your social media or something, or walking around talking to people all of those things count as your research. So the content, again, you want the statement of the problem and the statement of your research question or questions. Those should just be at the top of the page. There's no special formatting you need to use for those. I just need to see what your project is, basically. You're using APA citation style. I have some resources linked for you. So don't worry about that. If you're not familiar, we are going to look at that. Your annotation for each source. It sounds like I'm asking you for a lot, but I'm not asking you for more than 300 words, which is a lot. 300 words is, but if 100 to 300 words is the approximate range of a good, thorough annotation. You want to, again, who is your source and what authority do they have? A brief summary of the relevant portion of your source, just one brief paragraph. And this statement should be of authority, should be at the beginning of that summary paragraph. So you could start it off with, according to Dr. Smith, researcher in genetic engineering, blah, blah, blah. And that's where you begin your summary. So you've got the name of the person, their authority, and then the summary right together. And then another paragraph, small one again, that explains how this source contributes to your project. So how does it help you understand the problem, present a solution, provide evidence, provide a counter view, whatever it does for you. And then your style, you want the clear and concise, professional word choice and sentence structure, objective presentation of the summary. So you're not really being judgmental, although you can offer some evaluation, which is different than like giving opinion. Evaluation is talking about, well, this seems to be the strengths of this source and the weaknesses of this source, rather than an opinion would be, I don't like this source. So you want to stay away from like kind of that opinion. Your any evaluation you do should still be more focused on strengths and weaknesses of the source. You want to make sure that your interest in this topic is clear. You don't always have to say, I'm interested in this topic because, but just, put a little life into your writing is really what this is. And then avoid jargon as much as possible. Even if your sources use them, remember that your audience, me, is an academic professional audience, but I'm not an expert in each one of your chosen fields of research. So you're not writing for an expert in that field. You're writing for someone who is an academic. So you can, write for that audience, but explain any technical terms and jargon in using more common language. Right. And then your design, again, this kind of goes through the APA style right here. So APA citations, are built on author, date, title, source, and that's the order that those things will come in. And there are different things for books and web pages and videos, but they all kind of have those four main things: the author or authors, the date of publication, the title of the work, and the source where it can be found. Here's a link to one source that I find really helpful. They have really good explanation, demonstration of the formatting. And they also have a citation generator that works really well. If you use the citation generator, you still have to check it carefully though. Your document, the font should be size 12. You should use a font like Arial or Verdana or Times New Roman. Nothing like too squiggly, fancy or anything like that. Just a plain Jane sort of font. 1-inch margins on all sides. You want to use hanging indents where the first line of the citation is aligned to the left margin, and then all of the other lines are indented. Your annotation should be indented in line with the second and subsequent lines of the citations. So the only thing that should be aligned all the way to the left is the very first line of the citation. The rest of the citation and the annotation should all of those lines should be indented. Everything should be double spaced, no matter how annoying that is, and how awkward it looks. Those are the conventions. And when we're in technical writing, we want to be technical. So we're going to double space everything. Your page numbers should be in the upper right corner. Use the header function, insert header footer, and go and insert the page number all the way to in the right corner. You do not need a running head. That's no longer required in APA for student papers. So you do not need a running head. I'm not asking you for one. At the very top of your page, your first page, you should have annotated bibliography centered at the top of the page. There is an example at this link here. And I believe there's a video even at that. I can't remember now because I had so many videos and links that I was looking at. But I think there's one there. And I'm afraid to open things right now, given the way the internet is. And I keep getting unstable internet notices. So we're not going to push our luck. Does anyone have any questions about this, about what's on this document? Okay. Okay. So just to go back to this again, I do not want to push our luck with trying to watch this right now. This young person does a really, really good job of explaining an APA formatted annotated bibliography. And she's got some tricks for formatting and that, I mean, I learned some really cool things from her, like how to do hanging indents the easy way. She has a whole video actually on how to do hanging indents the easy way. You can find that just by going to her channel and looking at videos. It's usually one of the top ones on the top row, but you can just scroll through there. She's a really good resource. So I encourage you to watch this video on your own, especially if you have never done an annotated bibliography before, or if you are unfamiliar with APA formatting. She has some other videos that do deal with APA formatting, citations and stuff, so you could watch those as well if you need that support. But of course, you can always ask me too. If you would like to, I'd be happy to answer questions. So speaking of answering questions, does anyone have questions about the research process, about creating the bibliography, about what the expectations are, anything? Oops, that wasn't what I meant to do. How many pages? Well, that's going to depend on how many citations you have. So you're looking at 5 to 7 sources minimum. So you're probably looking at, I don't know, around 4 or 5, maybe 6 pages, depending on how much you write about your source. You possibly could have a little more, possibly a little less. Remember that each annotation should be 100 to 300 words. So that's your kind of your guide there. Any other questions? How many points is this assignment? Just like every other assignment, it's being graded on the 4-point scale. And so the way your grade will be figured at the end of the semester is the total number of points you've earned by the number of assignments we've had. And that will come out to your average on that 4-point scale. Other questions or comments or concerns? Okay. All right. So your assignment this week, oh wait, there is something. Do you want us to resubmit our edits for the memo proposals? If you are willing to do edits on your memo proposal, you may resubmit them and I will look at your second one and give you credit for improvements that are made. Okay. Your assignment this week is to do your research and create this annotated bibliography as the record of your research. That is due Monday. And then Monday's class will be about the actual formal report, what it consists of, how we go about writing it, putting it together, and then that will be your main work for next week. Your draft, your outline of your paper will be due the 24th, which is the Thursday next, not this coming Thursday, but the Thursday following. And then the 28th is when the draft of your report is due. We'll be doing peer review. You'll probably be working in groups of 2, maybe 3 for the peer review, since this is a longer project, and you'll have a longer time for peer review on the 28th, and then the final draft of your project will be due on the 31st. So that's kind of your overview of where we're going from here. So if you haven't finished reading the section on formal reports in the handbook, pages 183 through 205, please do that. There is an annotated formal report in that section. And the more familiar you are with that in class on Monday, the easier Monday's class will be for you, and the easier it will be for you to be writing your report. Right. Since we're not going to try watching that video together, we're going to end class a little bit earlier than I had planned tonight. I am here if anyone has any questions, anything you want to chat about. If you want to have any private chats, we can move into a breakout room for any private chats. But otherwise, if you don't have questions or concerns about anything, you are free to log out and go on about your evening. Somebody already logged out.
Oh, shit. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.